had that fear that I was not going to be able to get pregnant, and that it wasn't going to be easy. And we had an unfortunate amount of friends around us that also couldn't get pregnant, and I was also already older than what I had always imagined I would be when we had kids, and it was kind of one of those things of we knew we wanted to have kids together, and there's no such thing as the right time, and having that fear that it would take a while, we just kind of decided that let's just start and see what happens. And it happened right away. And then it was kind of like, oh, okay, so this is happening. We didn't tell, so we found out at the beginning of October in 2015, and we didn't tell anybody until Thanksgiving. So it took us a while. I had a subchorionic hematoma, so I bled for weeks and weeks, and they assured us that it wouldn't affect anything and it would go away on its own, but because people don't tell you that sometimes bleeding during pregnancy can be normal, it still felt really scary. So that held us back from telling people, I think, and then also because we weren't married, so there was kind of the fear of judgment there. I don't know why, because we don't come from like super conservative families or anything. It was just, I don't know, one of those things that worried us a little bit. So we told our parents at Thanksgiving, and then we sent out Christmas cards at Christmas, which I roll my eyes at now with holiday announcements. I feel really sensitive to those. But that, we did that. We never announced on social media. And that's another one of those things that I kind of wonder if I did know that something was coming and I didn't. I don't know, because you think about how you would always want to tell people, and then we felt really reserved in telling people, like protective over who we told. So we didn't tell everybody until Christmas. And then we lost her in February, so it feels like we didn't get a lot of time to celebrate that with people because we waited so long till we were 20 weeks at Christmas when we told everybody. We're almost 20 weeks, 18-ish, because our 20-week appointment was after Christmas. I thumbed through her baby book like a month or so ago on the anniversary of beginning of October, when we found out that we were pregnant with her, and there was a spot in the baby book that said, "Do you hope for a girl or a boy?" And our response in the baby book was, "We just want a healthy baby." So there's just all these things that makes me wonder, like, I don't know, I'm not like a super spiritual or religious person at all, but there's definitely some things that I wonder, like, these seem so obvious in hindsight of like something protecting us from something. So other than the hematoma, we had a fairly easy pregnancy. I wasn't really sick. I'd get nauseous, but not like the horror stories of morning sickness. Like, I don't think I ever actually got sick. I was tired beyond belief. But I worked like normal, and everything else was normal. She was healthy as can be through all of our checkups, but you don't get, unless there's cause for concern, you don't see a doctor from like 12 weeks to 20 weeks, and a lot can happen between that, and that's when everything did happen with her. So we went into our 20-week appointment not really knowing if we were going to find out if it was a boy or a girl. We were undecided. I didn't really want to find out, and he did. And so in the moment we did find out. And at that ultrasound, there was a lot of, she's perfect, looks great, all of this. It's a girl. And then we went out into the waiting room to see our doctor afterwards with just no idea of what was coming. And they came back into the room with a really concerned look on their face and said, "We're rushing you over to the hospital. there's something wrong with the baby's brain, and we need to check this out as soon as possible. So what turned into an exciting day of maybe finding out what she was or not finding out what she was turned into a very traumatic day that turned into weeks and weeks. We were talking about, we don't actually know how far along we were when we had her, and we haven't gone back and looked because we spent so much time in hospitals and doctor's appointments between that moment and the moment that we had her that
it's just a blur.
It's a blur. I think we were like 25 or 26 weeks pregnant, but I don't know. And I'm afraid to go back and look at like her autopsy results, even though like we know what's on there, so I just can't pull it out. So they rushed us over to MFM, maternal fetal medicine, at the hospital at 11 in the morning or something, and at 6 p.m. I was still there, and Dylan had to go take a midterm or a final.
Yeah, midterm.
So he left me there. We've listened to her heart beating strong through the whole appointment, just keeping a close watch on her. Her brain was rapidly filling with fluid, so her head was measuring a little bit too big. Because of how fast it was filling with fluid, it was also a risk to me, but they weren't really sure what was happening, so it was just a matter of in and out of the doctor's appointments. We had an amniocentesis, I think that's how you say it, at some point, but I don't think it was that day. I think we had to go back.
Yeah, I think it was a few days after.
Had to go back for it, which was traumatic, really painful, and the needle stays in there for like a while. I can't remember, but it was, and there's risks that come along with that, but at that point it didn't really matter. At one point, we spent a lot of time over at Seattle Children's also. We had a fetal MRI, which was an hour long, and I had a panic attack inside that machine. So they had to stop it because I had to be completely still in order for that, because the baby isn't
going to stay still.
Well, most babies, when it stays still, she didn't have the ability to move, so I never felt her kick or anything, because which was one of the like concerns at first in the 20-week appointment, is they kept trying to poke her to get her to move and stuff, and she wasn't moving, and she was breathing, like, well, I guess not breathing, but her heart was beating and stuff, so I don't know, we just thought she was stubborn or whatever. We didn't think anything of it. So we had those MRIs over at Seattle Children's, a lot of follow-up appointments over there. She was diagnosed with Dandy Walker syndrome, and they were hesitant to even diagnose her with that. They ended up it being a variation of Dandy Walker syndrome.
It's the closest thing that they could
it was something,
make it seem like that's what it was.
Yeah, it was something they had never seen in medical history, so they didn't really have anything to compare it to. I don't really know how to... It's like a complex brain malformation.
The brain doesn't grow completely.
Yeah, so she didn't have a cerebellum, so there was nothing connecting her brain to her spine. There was a massive cyst and then enlarged ventricles in her brain. So her heart was healthy, her organs were healthy, but her brain basically never
developed.
Well, it did develop. It stopped developing. They said around like 13 or 14 weeks. So when we went in for our 12-week appointment, she was fine, and there was no cause for concern. And then sometime between then, it happened, and they said that
I think that she had a stroke in utero, and that's what caused the cyst to start forming and everything to start happening. So just a sudden traumatic event. And there was concern for us that it could still be genetic. They said, I remember them saying that it was one of three things, and that it was either Dandy Walker, some other type of ailment that happened, or it could have been a genetic thing. They said the genetic condition was the least likely, but if it was that there's like a 25% chance of reoccurrence, which is something that we still think about to this day. But they've never really given us a definitive answer, because it doesn't sound like they know why it happened or what really happened. And like she said, it's something that I think we still to this day haven't really come to terms with it, and haven't wanted to look through and try to figure out exactly what happened, because it's just too difficult.
Yeah, and they don't know what happened. They think that she probably had a stroke, but even that they couldn't explain. They said they still don't know why that happens to babies in utero. It does happen. It's very rare, but why they don't know.
And you guys can't get tested or anything to know if you are carriers?
We did get tested, she got tested, so nothing was genetically wrong with her. So they basically just told us that it was a freak accident and that there's no reason that it should happen again, but there's no reason that it should have happened the first time, so there is that chance. I think it's a small chance. We haven't been tested to see if we're carriers for anything, because there isn't really anything to look for, because genetically everything was completely normal with her. It was just like a separation of the brain, and they think it was caused from internal injury, and there really wasn't a lot of explanation.
Yeah, that day that we found out, I think that was one of the worst days to me, because of everything that had to happen. That it started out, it was just going to be a normal day. I had the day off of work, and we were just going to go to the doctor, and then I was going to go to class and take a midterm, and everything was going to be great.
Yeah.
And then the short doctor's visit turned into an all-day experience, and I had to leave in the middle of it without getting a full answer.
So that whole time was just a giant blur. We spent a lot of time at the doctor's. We spent a lot of time missing work. We spent a lot of time curled up in a ball. And it is a giant blur. I don't know a lot of what happened during that time, other than where we were and where we weren't. Which was one of the really hard parts about a lot of those doctor's appointments, is that we would go in knowing that there was nothing happening in her brain, but we were listening to her heartbeat the entire time through all those appointments, because everything neck down was totally fine in utero, but wouldn't have functioned without me. So we went into the hospital on a Friday morning and watched Inside Out, which is all about feelings. So we sobbed through a children's movie that day in the hospital, and started to have contractions at around lunchtime, probably, I would say. Again, I really don't remember.
We were also just put an offer on a house, and so we're filling out paperwork for a house that we ended up not even getting, but
in the hospital. So I think that was obviously a denial piece of that we were shopping for a house that we could bring a baby home to, and we were so detached from what was not detached, but I don't think we had accepted what had happened, and so something came available that day, and
how crazy the market was, we felt we just had to go for it. Yeah.
One of the nurses was like, "You guys are putting an offer on a house? Like, what are you guys doing?"
I think I had an essay I was writing as well in between, and just trying to exist and not make it the only thing that was controlling our lives. I think that's something that we try to use to. This wasn't gonna be the thing that defined us, and that we tried everything we could to make this a step on the road to the rest of our lives, and that either could be positive or negative, and it's something that it either could have prevented us from really feeling 100% connected to it at the moment or in that moment, and not everything that we've gone through now of just the acceptance of it.
Yeah, I think it was massive denial of just trying to hang on to something that was normal. And for us, that was that we were shopping for a house to bring a baby home to. That was school.
I was going right back to work.
Yeah.
Monday morning.
So I started going into labor around lunchtime, I think, noon. I had incredibly bad contractions, like back contractions, which I wasn't expecting. You know, I knew that I was going into labor. I knew that I was giving birth to her. But what I didn't know is how similar it would be to a full-term baby. And it was incredibly painful, the contractions. So I had an epidural, and no shame there. that was magical medicine. But it didn't work the first time. And I put it off for as long as I could. I kept saying, no, I don't like to take pain medication, so it was kind of stubborn in the no, I've got this, I'm fine. And then they were like, I don't think you are. They definitely didn't push it on me, but they gave me that if you want this to work, like if you're waiting till a certain point where it will still work, now is that point. If we wait any longer, it's not going to kick in time. And I still resisted, and then it was like, okay, I'm in enough pain, give this to me. And then it didn't work, so they ended up giving me another one at the point in time where they could. I don't remember how long that was. And that one rested, and we both arrested me and took me out of pain, and we both actually fell asleep. We had been just crying all day long, and that relaxed me enough to where we could both fall asleep. And then when I had her, it woke me up. And that was definitely different, I imagine, from giving birth to a full-term baby, because I haven't done that, but she was tiny. And my water never broke. So she actually came out like in her little safety sack, and they broke the water once she was born. But that definitely wasn't like pushing. She just came out when she was ready, and she was tiny, so and I couldn't feel anything, so that maybe it would have hurt. But it was mostly the contractions, and so I woke Dylan up. I was too afraid to like look, because I wasn't really sure what had happened, because I couldn't really feel anything, but I could feel something, so I knew something was happening that was different. So I asked him to call the nurse, and they came in, and I had given birth to her and didn't really realize it. Again, I felt something, and I kind of had a feeling, but I didn't know. So they broke her water and cleaned her up for us. I can't remember if they asked us if we wanted to. I think they asked us if we wanted to clean her up, and we asked them to. I think we wanted to wait to see her until that was done. The MFM had kind of preempted us of what it would look like. I say it as in like the birthing process and all that, but also kind of what she would look like. They told us that this far along that she will look like she will when she's born, with just no fat on her body. And that's exactly what she was. She was a teeny, tiny baby that just looked skinny. She had, from the outside, you would have never known that anything was wrong. Which is pretty amazing, I think. A lot of times when there's things that are severely wrong with babies, they don't come out looking much like a baby, or you can physically see what was wrong with them. And because it was her brain, everything was developed on the outside. It was just the inside of her body that was still working on developing or had stopped developing, like her brain. The hospital we had her at it's heartbreaking, but it's amazing. They have these private suites for situations like this. So we had our own room with soundproof walls, so that in a different wing, so that we wouldn't have to hear
anybody else having their children.
And
there are special signs on all the doors letting anybody else who is going to come through there know that there are things you just know people aren't going to discuss over here, or making everyone aware of what is going on.
Yeah, which felt really safe. And then, like, all things considered, just the care that we received was phenomenal. So the nurse that was with us for most of the time, because we landed in most of her we did land in her 12-hour shift. She handed us Adeline once she was cleaned up and wrapped in her blanket, which was a blanket that we had brought from home. And the first thing she said to us was that she's perfect. And she was. And they let us spend as long as we needed with her. We had her at 2:30 in the morning. We had gotten there at like 6 a.m. the day before. And so we didn't leave until lunchtime the next day. There are those like cots that they have where they keep them cool, and I don't know if this hospital had them or not, but I'm thinking that they did because of the amount of time that we were able to have with her. So when we weren't holding her, that's where she was. We held her for quite a while and kind of needed a break almost. Not from her, but we were just exhausted, so we handed her back, and we went back to sleep for a little while. And then when we woke up, we asked them to bring her back in. And then they said, we can, if you're too tired, we can just bring her cot in here. So they rolled her cot in and had it right next to the bed for when, if we wanted to set her down. And she was 1 pound, 8 ounces. She felt heavy to us, she didn't feel tiny. We don't know anything any different. So she was just our baby. She was 1 pound, 8 ounces of perfection, other than the fact that she wasn't breathing. And she never would. We don't know the color of her eyes, but we can imagine, because we both have blue eyes. She had blonde hair. She looked like Dylan. She looked like she was gonna look. Had we had our full term, she was just
small,
tiny. So we spent hours with her, not with her. The hospital took pictures of her. We have one picture of me holding her and one picture of Dylan holding her that looks like her. And then we have the hospital photos that they look like she's dead. And in the pictures of us holding her, she doesn't look like that. It just looks like she's resting with her eyes closed. But the ones that they took of her, even though we're so grateful for them, but she just looks really red, and her, her hands don't look natural in them. So those ones are a little hard to look at, but we're still grateful that we have them. Like flowers and a card back to the nursing staff like the next day or something, or like 2 days later, just because we truly felt that they did, and they were amazing. I mean, the care that we received was amazing. I feel so sad because I know that that's not everyone's experience. I know a lot of people just, whether it's the anger part of that grief or what's actually happening in the care, but feel just like the staff could have done better, and we didn't feel that way at all. We couldn't have asked for better care in such a traumatic situation. I think especially the nurse that handed her to us and told us that she was perfect. I think that that is something that we will carry. I mean, I can replay a lot of that moment in the hospital, and that's usually the first one that I think about. Because she was absolutely perfect. I think holding her was the easiest part of all of it for me. Everything that had happened disappeared, and it was just giving birth for the first time to our firstborn child, the one that made us parents. We hugged her and kissed her and told her we loved her over and over again. And we also told her that we were sorry over and over and over again. That we were just sorry. I think that was the easiest part. Out of all of it, was almost a relief that she was in our arms. But deciding when we were done, that was not the easiest. So at some point you have to hand her over and decide, I'm done. And we would have never been done. I think something to relate that to was that whole the orca whale thing that just happened. I think
you had a very strong connection.
Yeah, I cried a lot through that, and just watching the mama or orca push her baby through the water for 19 days or whatever it was. People are like, wow, I can't believe this, and it's like, well, it's really no different than us. Like, I would have carried Adeline for 19 days too had I had the choice, but we didn't. We live in a medical world where that's not an option, and we had to give her back at a certain point. We didn't get to do that.
There was also the responses that you would get, or that news articles were talking about, and they're like, well, she's gotta stop at some point, or when is the family going to move on? And that was, you were very upset with those comments, because
it felt really real. What society was saying to the whale felt a lot like what society was saying to us, and a lot of like, wow, when are they going to move past this? Or when are they going to let go? And the answer is never. And then I also felt, I felt jealous. It sounds really silly, but I also felt jealous of the way people responded to that, because it was like, wow, this is so beautiful. Whereas the way that people respond to us doesn't feel that way. It feels more like, why would you share that? Why would you share those pictures? Why do you want to talk about this? And I guess like my biggest wish is that society would respond to women that have lost children in the way that society responded to the whale. Yeah. So we had to give her back, and we had to leave the hospital without her. Yeah.